Hey everyone, Solon here from Wynn Strength, wrapping up the 6th week of training with the Average to Savage Training Program 2.0 edition, focusing on hypertrophy. The program is written by Greg Nuckols over at StrongerByScience.com. Like usual, I'll leave links below so you can check out both of those resources, great free articles and learning to be had when you go over to StrongerByScience.com. So the 6th week of training is actually the last week of training before the deload, so we're kind of wrapping up that first mesocycle, the first phase of training. The way the program structured is there's 3 waves of training or 3 phases. This will be the first one, each with 6 weeks, and then 1 week deload in between each of those phases. So again, what I'm noticing is my body's still adapting to those new demands of hypertrophy training. Hypertrophy training is basically we're lowering the weights, but we're increasing the amount of tonnage. So if we compared side by side a strength program to a hypertrophy focused program, we're going to see a lot less tonnage with the strength focused program, but a lot heavier weights. And with the hypertrophy program, we're going to see a lot lighter weights, but a lot more tonnage. So we're lifting more weight overall for more reps, whereas the strength, we're really focusing on that heavier weights, which means we can't really lift that amount of weight for a lot of reps. So there's kind of this inverse relationship. As we increase the weight, we obviously can't increase the reps as well. So there's been challenges with keeping up with the sheer amount of volume that a hypertrophy style program demands. And again, with this program, because it is kind of based out of a garage gym, we're focusing on a lot of compound movements. So there's not a lot of isolation movements like you would at a typical, say, bodybuilding style program, where we're really focusing on isolating each individual muscle group. Here, we're kind of getting a more holistic full body approach to hypertrophy, where instead of, say, doing leg curls and then leg extensions, we're just doing squats. And high volume squats are just brutal, in my opinion. I think they're really tough. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But again, shifting over to this hypertrophy style training, I think it's going to do well to transfer over to the strength side. But again, we can't really attack both at once. I prefer to attack both in their own seasons, and now we're actually giving pretty much just about half of a year dedicated to hypertrophy, to really dial in and focus on putting on some muscle, and in the future using that muscle to exert force in terms of strength with lower reps. I like to take the approach of phase training, where we break down a year or 2 years into different focuses and different seasons, so that we can really dial in and increase each one of those strengths individually, so that over time we're building up those strengths or those goals, but each one is kind of getting put on the back burner while we focus on one specific pursuit. So right now for the program, 21 weeks, purely hypertrophy focused training, I'm not too focused on what my 1 rep match strength is or how it changes over the course of the training program. Yes, it will be used to help track progress and help compare performance week to week, just because it is one metric we have, but it's not the only metric we're using. Also, because it is hypertrophy, we're going to have to look at how much muscle am I putting on, and we're going to have some subjective views there, as well as some body measurements and body weight as well throwing in there. So again, that's kind of how this training cycle is going. What I'll do right now is throw over to some training footage over the week and show you some highlights of training. So this will be the last week with the SS stroke barbell squats. What you'll notice is I'm still kind of getting used to those squats. As the weights get heavier, you notice more pronounced form breakdown. So the first reps are kind of good and solid, but you'll notice as the reps go on, my hips start to rise faster than my back. And you'll also notice that my knees shoot back a lot more, so they slide back as I stand up, and there's almost a double movement of the weight as I stand up. So the weight shoot up, and then you'll see that little hitch in my back, and that's the camber of the weight playing with me trying to stand up with the squat. So you kind of rely a bit more on the back than the quads with this movement, as the legs are extending with the weight staying the same. So it is leaving my back in a position to good morning up the squat. You could say that's a good thing because it's training me to be able to squat with the good morning. But ideally, you would be maintaining that same back angle throughout the entirety of the lift. We can contrast that with the front squat. We see here this side view, and it's almost impossible to good morning up a front squat, just because the barbell is going to slide or fall off the front of it, just because of the way the front rack works. The front rack does engage more of that back activation as the back acts as a stabilizer to stop you from tipping forward. And funnily enough, because of the torque and the leverages, you're actually engaging the back harder than you would compared with the back squat. So this does help to engage more quads that way, whilst making your back strength really the limiting factor here, because when we take that out, you can generally back squat more than you can front squat, and that's due to that back activation. And here we move on to some arms and abs. Not something I usually focus on, but being a hypertrophy focused template, go to throw in some arms whenever I have some extra time in a training day. And again, some creativity is needed without having access to cable machines. So the overhead dumbbell tricep extension, I think they're a great movement to get a good stretch in the tricep, which does help to activate all three heads. I mean, even when you do have access to a cable machine, just doing the push downs doesn't activate that good stretch there. For the barbell curl, I've actually been enjoying this variant from Dr. Mike from Renaissance Periodization, which is to touch the forehead for each and every rep. This way you have a consistent range of motion, the hips to the head. It's nice and slow and controlled, otherwise you're going to knock yourself out by hitting your head too hard. But I was trying to keep my torso from swaying that much, but watching this view, there's a fair amount of torso swinging. And we are wrapping up this superset with some plate sit-ups using a 25-pound plate. I do try to keep the weight plate over my head as back behind my torso as possible, because if you let the weight move forward, it does act as a counterbalance to help you sit up. I am enjoying this particular ab movement for now. I don't tend to do the same ab movements week in, week out, and that's just because I'm not the biggest fan of direct ab work. So whatever is piquing my interest that week is what I'll perform. Moving on to some overhead pressing, breaking in the new pair of strong elbow sleeves from Mark Bell. I'll leave a link below to get your own pair. I do like the extra support and stored elastic energy that they provide to help push through the set. They don't just simply warm up the joint, they do actually provide some energy there, so it will help you lift some more weight, but they don't add too much weight. I probably would attribute the last 2 reps to the sleeves, just because we pushing a bit more than I normally would have. The form is slightly better this week with less side-to-side hip movement than in previous weeks. But you will notice I still have a fair amount of lower back arch creep in towards the end of that set. Wrapping up this week with some slingshot bench. This week I focus on making sure that I have a pause at the bottom of the bench. This is to ensure that I remove any bounce of the chest that happens, as well as remove any rebound that I get from the stretch reflex from my own musculature. Since we are getting that elastic assistance from the slingshot, there's really no need to introduce any other assistance to the lift. So that'll wrap up the 6th week of training. Overall performance was pretty good. One of the better weeks of performance. I think it's a great week to run into a deload week, which is great. We kind of push the body a little bit more this week, which I always recommend when you know there's a deload week. The next week, that last week before a deload, really push your body as hard as you can, because you know that next week of deload isn't going to be that stressful, and you're going to be able to use that time to recover while still keeping that body moving. So make sure to subscribe to the playlist so you don't miss out on the future episodes, as well as that final overall rating and review of the Average to Savage training program. This has been Selwyn from Wynn Strength, and remember, a better life through strength.